Hey, good morning to everybody and happy Easter. It's Daryl here. It's bright and freaking early, man. It's 5 a.m. here in Connecticut on the East Coast. I could not wait to start this video and wish you all happy Easter. I'll go through the niceties first before I really get into this. I'm hauling up. Look at that hill I'm coming up. This is Main Street in Bristol. Probably one of the biggest hills in the city. And I got a lot to talk about. I want to talk about Kilmar, Abrego. I want to talk about Kilmar, Abrego. Let's get into that. All right, I've told you guys before, I wake up about 1:30, 2 a.m. to start doing research to find something to talk about for this video. And the only reason I keep X, I can't stand X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, but the only reason I keep it is for this purpose, for going through it in the morning, for looking for things that infuriate me, that touch me, whatever, that are on X, TMZ and whatnot. And being Easter too, I see the hypocrisy from people on the right, talking about Jesus and he is risen. And on the other hand, happier than a pig in shit that Kilmar Abrego is in this death camp down in El Salvador. And I don't see the Christianity in that. Actually saw one post. Usually there's one post that sticks out, like on X. This morning, it was somebody, talking very piously and religiously about God and, not just Easter, but everything. And this person said, it's something Cherokee. Some woman pretending to be Native American. Not like a real American, but I'm not going to get into that. She says, she's talking about the way that these inmates are bowed down, forced to bow down and packed together in El Salvador prisons. And she says, why don't we do that in the United States? And I don't even have an answer for that. It just stuns me. I think of things like cruel and unusual punishment and due process. And I can't believe that some human beings are just so insensitive to anybody that's not like them. I say this, the reason that there's all these people that want to flood into this country is because of us, because of Americans, our voracious appetite for drugs and our prolific production of weapons. Those two things. Basically, we export and smuggle all these weapons, millions of weapons, south into these countries. And our voracious appetite for drugs really funds all of this. Americans aren't being poisoned. I'm an 18 and a half year. As a matter of fact, this Wednesday will be exactly 18 and a half years. 18 years and 6 months this Wednesday that I've been completely clean and sober from crack cocaine, heroin, pills. I was a full-blown crackhead junkie. I've been clean and sober for 18 and a half years. Let me tell you this, back when I was dealing, back in the late 80s and the 90s, around here, it wasn't Mexican gangs. This has been around forever. The same thing's been going on. It just changes names, it changes people, but it's the same game. Back then, it was Dominicans around here. Being a lower level dealer, I always heard how Dominicans run the game. You got to have respect for Dominicans. You got to deal with the Dominicans. If you want to push weight, you got to go through the Dominicans. They were pretty much the bosses of the game here in New York City area, the tri-state area. It wasn't the Mexicans back then. Same thing, just, different people, different. It doesn't change. It's all got to do, if you want to get rid of this stuff, you got to treat drug addiction. You got to treat Americans' drug addiction. And you really got to do something about this. Our country has more guns than people. And it's, I was raised with guns. But it's, I don't know. I don't even know if anything can be done about the guns. But treating Americans' drug addiction is at the top of my list for if you want to solve a lot of these problems. Okay, basically two things I want to talk about now. This misconception, this labeling of people on the right, or people on the left, I'm sorry, people like me, liberals, that we love gangs, that we love violence, that we hate our country. You know, that's nothing could be further from the truth. I have a family. I'm a recovering addict. I love my family. You know, I believe in crime and punishment. I actually, for cases like Jeffrey Dahmer, I totally believe in the death penalty. You know, there's this whole thing is painting liberals or Democrats as being for crime and gangs is total BS. What we are for is for due process, for the Constitution. Okay, let's get into the meat of it now. I want to talk about Trump's picture and his truth or his tweet showing the alleged gang tattoos on the knuckles. All right. This is the thing that I spotted right away, and I suspect a lot of people did too. The way that the letters MS-13 were intentionally made to look like they were tattoos on the knuckles. Like, as soon as I looked at that, I was like, okay, where does it say MS-13 on here? I see a bunch of symbols, and above the symbols, I see MS-13. And I'm looking close. I zoom in. I was like, you know, did Kilmar actually put an M, an S, and a 13? Because that's what it's made to look like. Whoever did this with, like, Trump and his infamous Sharpie, that's what it looks like. You know, it's made to look like that MS-13 was an original tattoo on there. You know, because I had a hard time distinguishing if that was actually on his tattoos, and it wasn't. Okay, now this, what makes Trump an expert on gang tattoos? And yes, another thing too is everybody gets tattoos nowadays. You know, unfortunately, when I was younger, I moved in circles. I was never into white supremacy, but some of the people I was hanging around with had white supremacist tattoos across their stomachs and whatnot. And I did know that if they dropped out of the gang, that they had to remove those tattoos by whatever means necessary. You know, so I'm wondering, you know, how long has Kilmar had this tattoo? You know, it could have been, you know, it's not evidence, man. It's not due process. That brings me to my next thing, my example. All right. This is actually perfect timing for what I'm about to talk about too, because right up past this building, there's a policeman sitting in a car right there, right in front of me. Right there. So it kind of goes along with what I'm going to talk about next. Okay, y'all saw that cop I just walked by. Now, I am a recovering addict, recovering heroin, crack cocaine addict, clean and sober for 18 and a half years. But I have a history. I have an arrest record. I was never convicted, but let's just say there's a lot. My name, I'm sure my name is in a lot of records in different police stations. Okay, I'm out here in the night, walking around, and you know, you could consider these bad neighborhoods or just a drug neighborhood. Okay, so somebody could easily come up to me. If I had brown skin and my name had a Spanish name, I'd be screwed. You know, what are you doing walking out here? You know, let's look at my record. Oh, you got a record of drugs. What are you doing in this neighborhood? You know, you see what I mean about due process. You know, this is why I'm not saying that Kilmar Abrego, I'm not saying he's innocent or he's guilty. I'm not saying he's a good guy or a bad guy. What I am saying is he deserves due process. You can't just scoop somebody up, even if they're not a citizen, an American citizen. You know, and it scares me that, you know, like half the country, a third of the country, Trump supporters think this is perfectly okay. You know, there's hearsay. Oh, he's a gang member. He's got tattoos. You know, and I see Trump saying that he allegedly hit his wife or something. You know, I start thinking about that too. Here's Trump talking about, you know, criticizing, which, you know, women. I've never hit a woman in my life, but I think about his past. He is actually a convicted felon. You know, and here he is accusing somebody without due process, and his history of grabbing women or sexually assaulting women. You know, it's like, well, you know, isn't this? I don't know if you want to say the pot calling the kettle black, but I don't know if Kilmar is actually guilty or innocent, but he deserves due process. And it's kind of ironic and hypocritical for a convicted felon to sit there, you know, with his Sharpie and pointing out these tattoos and labeling these tattoos as if he's an expert on getting tattoos. You know, that this guy should be imprisoned in this hellhole in El Salvador. You know, pretty soon, Trump said himself that he wants to start sending American citizens there. You know, and Trump's supporters are all for it. But just wait, sooner or later, it's going to be their relatives, their friends that are going to get scooped up without due process and sent out of the country. And we'll see how much they like it then. Like they say, F around and find out, man. You know, have a good Easter.